Well, UFC Fight Night 87 is in the books from here in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and what a night it was, particularly for the Dutch, going 3 for 3, all knockout wins, but no bigger winner than Alistair Overeem, who was the victor in the main event against teammate Andrei Arlovski, getting a second-round TKO. And Simon, I'm joined by Simon Head here from The Sun in the UK, and Simon, just what a debut for the UFC in the Netherlands. It pretty much couldn't have gone any better. First of all, Alistair Overeem's performance in the main event. What did you think of it? Did you see what you need to see out of him to get that title shot that he asked for post-fight?
Absolutely, and I think he's in the right position now. He needed to win decisively, and he fought quite conservatively to start with, but when he needed to explode, he did, and he got a decisive finish. I think he's got a compelling argument. Put him in a title shot, definitely.
Yeah, and who would you like to see him fight in that title shot? Obviously, next weekend, UFC 198, the main event is champion Fabricio Verdum putting the title on the line against Stipe Miocic. Regardless, interesting fights. You know, Overeem does have a lot of history with Verdum in particular. They fought twice before. I know their last fight in Strikeforce was pretty underwhelming. Not a lot of people loved that one, but still, it's a few years later. Verdum, in my opinion, is a completely different fighter. They both kind of are. Alistair's changed his style. Do you want to see that trilogy fight, or would you rather see, the fresh matchup with someone Overeem has yet to share the cage with?
I think Stipe Miocic is the best heavyweight in the world right now, and I think he will beat Fabricio, and I think that's the better fight on paper. I think that'll be the more entertaining fight. There is that backstory with Fabricio, but I think we want to see exciting fights. We want to see the two best, most dynamic heavyweights in the world fighting for the world championship, and for me, that'll be Stipe and Alistair Overeem.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the co-main event, we saw Stefan Struve really get the performance we haven't seen from him in a long time. He looked, in my opinion, better than ever, just from a physical standpoint. He really looked filled out, looked strong in there, and we just saw him put Bigfoot away very quickly, 15, 16 seconds. There seems to be a discrepancy on the time, depending on who you ask, but either way, a very, very fast knockout. And, what did you see out of that fight? Did you see a guy that he's still very young? I think he's already had 17 UFC fights to his name, but, the past few years, obviously very rough for him, a lot of health issues, some losses. Do you think Stefan Struve is back, as he said? Do you think he's a guy that, if he gets a few wins, he can be a factor in this heavyweight division?
Yeah, I think the thing to consider here is he's still incredibly young in the sport. He's got an awful lot of experience under his belt, but he's also had to go through an awful lot of bad times in his personal life. He's had health issues, and it feels like now the shackles are finally off, and maybe this was the sort of the turning point for him, fighting on home soil with the support of a nation behind him, 10,500 fans, getting that win in such super quick, decisive fashion. Maybe this is just a start for Stefan Struve. He's been thrown in with guys before, perhaps a little bit early in his career, if you consider how young he is. And fighters, especially heavyweights, they tend to mature a little bit slower than other weight classes. They tend to do better once they hit their 30s. So there's still loads of time for Stefan Struve, and I think that we've still got the best to come from him for sure.
Yeah, and then on the other side of that coin, we saw Bigfoot Silva lose again, another knockout. I believe he's won 6-1 in his past 8 UFC fights. I think all 6 of those losses, or 5 of them, are knockouts, and it seems like every time it's happening quicker. It's 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and then 15, 16 seconds tonight. What does he do next? I know he said in the post-fight quotes the UFC sent out to us that he'll be back. Do you think he should fight again? Do you think the UFC should still be offering fights, or do you think they should let him go? And if he wants to, go elsewhere, that's up to him.
I think it's an interesting point because obviously he's a big, huge guy, and it's been well documented that he's needed to take testosterone in the past to lift himself up to sort of an elite level where he's on a level playing field with other people. Perhaps the advent of USADA and the difficulty in getting to UEs now has hit him harder than most. And what we're seeing now is a shadow of the guy that fought Fedor Emelianenko and beat him. We don't like to see guys going in there and getting knocked out quick like that. And he's had it happen to him a few times now. I'm not someone who wants to turn around someone and tell them to retire, but you don't want to be seeing him in too many more of those fights for sure. Maybe give him another one a bit further down the ladder, see if he can still operate and have a career, maybe not quite at the absolute highest level. But yeah, he shouldn't necessarily be fighting these top 10, top 12 guys anymore, I don't think. It's too dangerous for him.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the final thing before I let you go, any other performance that really stood out to you on the card? Gunnar Nelson looked phenomenal. I thought Jermaine Randamia looked phenomenal. Kyoji Horiguchi as well, his first fight under American Top Team. Anyone else really quickly that you were just really blown away by?
I'd have to say Gunnar Nelson. I think considering what happened to him in December against Damian Maia, he got schooled in that fight, and it was a case of where does he go from here? He was building his way up to contender status, and then he took on Damian and got taken to school on the mat in the one area of his game where he excels. But he came back. He looked bigger, stronger, leaner, and he looked as sharp as I think we've ever seen him in the octagon. This was possibly the best Gunnar Nelson we've ever seen, and against a guy, Albert Tumenov, who I think we're going to hear a lot from in the years to come. Right now, maybe the time wasn't quite right for him, but I think Gunnar Nelson, I think we're going to see him moving back up into that top 10 rankings position, and maybe get himself in a position to challenge maybe middle of next year. I think he is the real deal, and he just needed to fix a few things in his game, and from what we saw today, he's fixing them.
Absolutely. Well, it was a great night. All those performances really stood out, but just a beautiful event for the UFC here in Rotterdam. Sold out crowd, record gate, and I think everyone really enjoyed this event, us in particular. Catch all our post-fight coverage. I'm Mike Bond. This is Simon Head. Thank you so much for watching, and we have all the post-fight coverage on MMAJunkie.com.